Welcome to this Pytha tutorial where we will have a closer look at the copy command. We will design a simple rack to get to know this tool and some simple modeling techniques. First, we draw a block at any position, as I explain in the block tutorial. We use the dimensions 38, 300, 1390. Enter. Now switch to Part Tools 1 menu and activate the Copy command. Normally, we would now have to select the parts we want to copy and confirm this selection with the middle mouse button. I explain this process in detail in the tutorial Delete and Part Selection. However, you can see that the input prompt does not require a part selection, but asks directly for the distance. You can also see that the block lights up orange and the gizmo is displayed. Pytha has skipped the selection step because our project currently only contains a single part. It goes without saying that we want to edit exactly this one. I discussed the question of distance in the input prompt thoroughly in the Move tutorial. There I show that there are 3 ways to specify the distance and direction of the move: the gizmo, the value input, and the point-to-point method. I use the gizmo to move the block in the desired direction and enter the value 338. Enter. Pytha creates a copy of the selected part with the distance I have entered. As you can see, the workflow is exactly the same as for move. The only difference, when moving, the part disappears from its original position and only exists in its new position. When copying, the part remains in its position and an identical copy is placed in the new position. At this point, I would like to give you some tips on how to enter values. If you are not sure which numerical value you need to enter for a displacement, think like this. This corner point of the original part corresponds to this corner point of the copy. The value you have to enter is the distance between these 2 points. And, of course, this applies to all the points of the part. In my case, I wanted to achieve a clear distance of 300 millimeters between the 2 blocks. I therefore have to add the 38 millimeters of material thickness to the desired distance. Therefore, I had to enter 338. I activate the Copy command in Part Tools 1 menu again. As our project now contains more than one part, Pytha asks, as usual, which parts should be copied. With a left click, I select the element that I have created as a copy before and confirm the selection with the middle mouse button. Pytha asks for the distance. I could now use the gizmo to create another copy in the same way. But this time I want to use the point-to-point method and therefore pick this point as the guide point and this point as the target point. The direction displacement dialog opens, exactly as explained in the Move tutorial. At the same time, I get a preview that shows me how the current values of the dialog affect my scene. This is also identical to Move. In addition, the input field number of copies appears here. As soon as I increase this value, Pytha creates further copies of the part with the same spacing. But 1 copy is enough for me at the moment, so I enter a 1 here and exit the dialog with the Only X button. Next, I switch to the Parts menu and add a top and a bottom. To do this, I pick existing points, as explained in the block tutorial. I would now like to copy the bottom to the top. To do this, I would actually press the Copy button in Part Tools 1 menu, then select the bottom and then confirm the selection with the middle mouse button. However, this can also be done more quickly. If I select the bottom directly with the right mouse button, a context menu with numerous commands appears. I can now apply these directly to the picked part. I select Copy at the top of the list. The input prompt shows distance, the block lights up orange, and the gizmo is displayed. You see, we have skipped the usual selection process and can define the displacement directly. However, only a single part can be edited in this way, just the one part that you have picked with the right mouse button. Alternatively, you can also right-click anywhere in the empty drawing area, in other words, where there are no objects. For example here, the context menu appears again with numerous commands. I activate the copy command again. However, unlike before, the input prompt now asks which parts are to be edited. We therefore have to make a selection as usual and confirm with the middle mouse button. This time, we have started the copy command directly and didn't have to navigate through the vertical menus. I would now like to copy the selected bottom by simply entering a value, as I explain in the Move tutorial. As I only want to copy the shelf in the Z direction and the copies should have a clearance of 300 mm, I enter, 338. Enter. The Move command would be finished at this point. However, as we have activated Copy, how many copies appears in the input prompt? I enter 3 to create 3 copies and press the Enter key. Pytha creates the copies with a clear distance of 300 mm between each of the copies. I right-click in the empty construction area and activate Copy. Now I select these 2 shelves and confirm the selection with the middle mouse button. I select this point at the bottom as the guide point. I want this point to touch the inside of the right block after the move. I therefore pick either this edge or the point below as the target point. However, the displacement should only be parallel to the x-axis, so I press the Only X button in the dialog. I want to line up this small model to create an entire rack unit. To do so, I select all parts except for the left side and confirm the selection. I would now like this point to come to rest here. I can now enter any number of copies in the Direction Displacement dialog. As each copy has the same distance from the previous one, the parts line up neatly. I decide to make only one copy and close the dialog with Only X. I now copy this top and the right side in the same way, as well as one of the bottoms. I click on a guide point and then tell Pytha where this point should be placed. Since I don't have to make any changes in the dialog, I can simply confirm my entries with the middle mouse button. I would now like to show you a special type of copy, the so-called multiple copy. This command creates evenly distributed copies between 2 selected parts and can also be found in Part Tools 1 menu. As soon as I have activated the function, Transform Part 1 appears in the input prompt. I now left-click on the top. As only the one part can be selected at a time in this function, I don't have to confirm the selection. The input prompt asks the next question immediately after the left click. Into Part 2. Now I select the bottom with another left click. A small dialog appears in which we enter the desired number of copies. The great thing about this function is that all copies are placed at the same distance between the 2 objects that I have selected. This allows us to distribute our shelves evenly along the height without having to do any calculations. You may be surprised that Pytha asks, transform Part 1 into Part 2. This is because Pytha does not simply create copies between the parts with this command, but can even step-by-step transform the shape of the first part into that of the second part. To show you what I mean by this, I'll first slightly change the shape of the rack. First, I delete a few parts that we no longer need. I now have to extend the top and bottom so that they touch the left side. There are several ways to do this in Pytha. One of them is to move the end faces to the desired position. The shape of the part will then automatically follow this change. You can not only edit parts in Pytha, but also the individual elements of a part. This means the points, edges, and faces. This time I will not use Part Tools 1 menu, but the Face Tools menu. Just like in Part Tools 1 menu, you will also find the commands delete, move, copy, etc., except that these do not refer to the entire part, but only to individual faces of the parts. I select the Move command. The workflow is identical to the command in the Part Tools 1 menu. The only difference is that this time you only select individual faces via left-click or frame selection and not the entire part. I would like to deform the parts even more. Therefore, I now switch to the Edge Tools menu and use the Move command in this menu too. You've probably already guessed. Here too, everything is identical to the command in Part Tools 1 menu, except that this time only edges are edited. In the frame selection that I draw, there are edges of both the side and the top. Therefore, the shape of both parts changes at the same time. I add a value input to the gizmo movement in each case. As a result, all the panels have realistic dimensions after I've edited them. That's it! Now we have laid the base to learn more features of the Multiple Copy command. I activate the Multiple Copy command in Part Tools 1 menu. In response to the question, Transform Part 1, I select the left side. And the second part is the right side. I increase the number of intermediate copies, which makes the transformation clearly visible. Especially when I turn the camera, you can see how the narrow side has gradually changed into the wide side and vice versa. I repeat the process for the top and bottom, and here too you can observe the transformation of the parts. If you want to carry out your own experiments of this type using the Multiple Copy command, you must make sure that the two selected parts have the same number of points, edges, and faces. Otherwise, a multiple copy is not possible. At the moment, the horizontal panels are still colliding with the vertical ones. Of course, this is not yet a clean design. I can use the Cutting Plane command to cut off the shelves on the sides. By the way, another way to get to the commands, delete, move, copy, and rotate very quickly is here at the top, in the icon bar. These buttons call the same command as in Part Tools 1 menu or in the Context menu. It is just a different way to activate it. For example, as soon as I press this button, the Copy command is called. The input prompt immediately asks for the part selection as usual. The next steps are identical to those shown above. At the moment, the four icons each show a block. This symbolizes that parts are being edited. With the toggle switch here at the front, you can switch the editing mode from parts to faces, edges, points, and texts. Depending on the selection, the icons change their image and indicate which type of element is being edited. I hope you enjoyed our little design, and I would like to welcome you back to my next tutorial.